started in the next minute or so. All right. Good evening. We are going to go ahead and call our meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. Dr. Thomas, if you would conduct roll call for us.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Davis. Excuse me. Miss Gallagher.
Here.
Mrs. Davis.
Here.
Dr. Yeager.
Here.
Dr. Dykeman.
Here.
Dr. Anderson. Dr. Gant.
Here.
Dr. Maddox. And Attorney Hope.
Here. Okay, thank you. So we do have a quorum. We will move forward to item 2 on our agenda, and that is to amend or adopt the agenda before us. The floor is open.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, and can you speak in your microphone, please?
Absolutely, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda.
Okay,
I would like to add a discussion item of board member, what have we been calling it? Our norms around board member behavior.
okay, thank you. So there's a motion on the table to, as a discussion item, Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Okay, as a discussion item for board member behavior.
And our norms.
I'm sorry?
And our norms.
And our norms. So board member behavior and our norms. So there's a motion on the floor.
I second.
Okay, who was that? Ms. Hall? Okay, we have a second by Ms. Hall. The floor is open for a discussion regarding the motion. Dr. Anderson, can you speak in your mic for me?
Could I get a little bit more clarity on what this motion will do? What is the purpose of the motion?
The purpose of the motion is to point out some irregularities in the norm and inconsistencies in the norm and what we're calling our next steps. And I'd like for us to have a discussion about how we close that. And because we've never flushed out, if we have a situation like this, how do we go forward with it? I would want us to discuss that. I think we're in the middle of a situation. I feel like I'm in the middle of a situation where I don't know how to move forward with a redress in a situation.
Okay.
So it's inconsistency in terms of what the norm is saying and how we're applying that, and then also wanting to make sure that should a situation arise, that we have a process by which we undertake that discussion.
Okay, so this discussion then is to discuss revising that section of the norms. Is
Could
that
be a revision. That would be great. I don't know. I could be the only person who doesn't understand it. So that's what the discussion will be.
Okay.
I
Thank
have a
you.
scenario for us to work through. Right.
All right.
Well, I didn't know that that's what was being proposed. I'm not prepared to discuss a revision to the norms. I don't know that we were, I personally just am not prepared to have a discussion about revising the norms. If it's a question of, I think in the current situation, in my understanding, we are following the norm and are in partway through the way to address it through the norm.
Well, that's the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dykeman and Dr. Anderson. Other questions about the motion on the floor? Dr. Yeager?
I'd just like to confirm that we're here to discuss the strategic plan and to focus on the kids. And we've got the entire staff here to present to us. They've been working very hard. I'd like to hear what they have to say and focus on what we're here to do.
I do
Okay,
have
thank
a
you, Dr. Yeager.
just
Miss
a
Miss Hall?
question. Will there be another time that the whole board will be together to be able to have this discussion? Or majority of the board will be able to be together to have this discussion in the near future?
I'm not sure about the near future. So the board can always call a meeting with the appropriate amount of members. That also rests with the president or a superintendent. I know we did have recently uh, the second part to our self-assessment, where we at that point discussed really just sort of assessing where we are in a variety of domains. So in my mind, that would be a little bit of a more appropriate place. We do have our upcoming retreat as well in the summer. No,
Was our retreat canceled? I thought we voted to cancel our retreat in January.
we have one in the summer.
In the summer, I'm
Mhm.
sorry.
Yes, we have one in the summer. And so, of course, if the board prefers to have a retreat before then, that's always a possibility as well. And so I guess short answer to your question is that no, we don't have any current meetings where that particular item is on the agenda. But if the board feels, majority of the board feels that that is necessary to go back and revise our norms or look at our norms or this particular norms, then that rests within the board's power.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure. Dr.
When I
Yeager.
first joined the board, there were issues about this, and we did spend a great deal of time working on the norms as a full board, and those norms were put in place in response to an event, so the new board members maybe don't have that history. But we did have a problem, and we worked out norms for handling that problem. And just to assure you that the norms are being followed right now. We are following the norms that we wrote almost 2 years ago in response to the same sort of problem. So I can just assure you that we are following those norms.
So,
If they need to be rewritten, we need to sit down as a full board and figure that out. But I don't know that we're in a place right now that we can do that.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Yeager. Ms. Davis.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So I would refute that. I would definitely disagree that we're following the norms, and that's what the discussion was about. What happens when we don't follow the norms? And then what is our next step? And so that's something I think that we could easily discuss very briefly and bring clarity to that. Or maybe we're following the norms, but they aren't applied equally to all board members. Some people get to follow them and other people don't. So that's a discussion.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I will, if there are not any more comments, I will just sort of, for information, our norms are found in our library in board docs, and we have a variety of different norms there. Just lost them. Sorry about that. But as it relates to working through situations that occur with board members, that would be our norm 13A. And that's available for the public's review. And all of the norms that are there were norms that the board, as mentioned earlier, created as a group. And there was some general consensus around that. There are 5 steps according to that norm, as far as what the steps are, how to address situations when board members are perceived not to follow the policy. And so that is our current norm that we have. And so just for the public's information, that is what we're referencing at this time. Are there any additional questions or discussion about the motion on the floor to amend the agenda before we take the vote? Okay. All in favor of adding a discussion item, or amending the agenda to add a discussion item for board member behavior and our norms, if you would raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed, the same sign. Aye.
Aye.
All right. And any abstaining? Okay. Ms. Palmer, did you get that? Okay. Okay, and now I'll open up the floor. So that motion did not pass. Can you verify, Ms. Palmer? I didn't get the count. I'm sorry, what was that, Ms. Palmer? Okay, so that motion didn't pass. So we're back at the number 2, and that is to amend and or adopt the agenda before us.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Dr. Anderson, a second by Dr. Maddox. Any follow-up questions or concerns about the motion on the floor? Okay, all in favor of adopting the agenda as before us, if you would, raise your hands and say aye. Aye. And any opposed? Same sign.
Aye. That's me.
Okay, and were there any that abstain? All right, so that motion passes. Okay, so we will move to action item 3, and this is the action to approve a resolution of the Clark County Board of Education declaring the results of an election held on November 2nd, 2021, and for other related purposes. So the floor is open for a motion. Well, Mr. Pruitt, can you just provide just
Gonna
a,
say we asked him to be here tonight in case
Yeah.
you all needed clarity.
Okay. Yes, this is just one of the steps in getting the election, the SPLOST election certified so that we can then issue the bonds that the voters authorized when they authorized the SPLOST. So this is simply declaring that the board agrees with the election results. The Board of Elections is passing a similar resolution. This will be put together with a lot of other paperwork, and to make a long story short, we'll eventually get this filed with the court, and a judge will sign an order declaring that those election results are final, cannot be contested in the future, and then Mr. Schuneman and our investment banker can issue the bonds.
okay, thank you. Any follow-up questions for Mr. Pruitt or further clarifications before we take action? All right, the floor is open for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so Dr. Maddox made a motion. Was that Dr. Dykeman? A second. Just for the record, no follow-up questions or concerns. All right, all in favor of approving the resolution in item 3, if you would, raise your hands and say aye. Aye. And any opposed, the same sign. And any abstaining? Okay, so that motion passes. We will move forward to our presentations and discussions. And under these presentations are discussion and presentations about the strategic plan, also about the student achievement update, and then, excuse me, climate and culture update. So Dr. Thomas, I'll turn the floor over to you for item 4.
Yes, ma'am. We had had some discussions earlier about really wanting to have time for the board to hear about the strategic plan, what we're doing with the strategic plan, actions that are being taken under each priority area. So tonight's presentation was kind of organized by Ms. Bonace with the purpose of focusing on one area in 2 of the priorities, and then we presented a priority last week, I think, in budgeting in finance, and we'll do so we'll try to do like one a month, a shorter one, and then ones that take a little more time. We have 2 this month, and we'll do 2 in March. And we try to get the presentations to you so you can ask any questions, or at least be thinking about questions that you might have. So we don't want it to be so much that it's too much to really process, but enough. So we've asked each chief to focus on one key area each time that they present. But we're going to start with just the overview about the strategic plan and how we all have to work together with it.
That's right. Actually, tonight we're going to memorize the strategic plan. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So good evening. It's nice to see you all. My name is Emily Boness, and one of my responsibilities is helping to monitor and keep track of the strategic plan and to make sure that we are reporting out to you and to the community about our progress. So this evening, we are going to become familiar or refamiliarized with the strategic plan. I know you all passed it earlier this year. And so I want to just make sure that we remember what that is and think and how to think about it. To that end, we're going to talk about how we're measuring progress and what we want to make sure you all know about when we're talking about the objectives and the initiatives, and then answer questions about that work. But first, Ms. Gallagher came in and said she's tired of meetings, so we're going to do an activity. So if you could all come around and just stand in front of your microphone and think about this question. In your role as a board member, what is one topic or issue as it relates to your role about which you are passionate? You get 1 sentence. So think about that for a moment and then come around and stand in front of your microphone. Please. Yeah, I was like, come on over. They're going to catch it or try and catch it and then pass it along. The only rule is that you can't pass it directly to the person to your right or to your left. And then once you have received the ball, you can go ahead and put your hands behind your back so we can keep track of who has already said their sentence. Are there any questions? All right. Go ahead. Thank you. Okay, we're going to do the microphone. So, yep, so everyone can hear.
I am most passionate about empowering parents to be the best advocate for their children. Okay.
I am on topic. I am passionate about student learning, including technology usage and accessibility. And that's one. Okay. Nicole, get ready.
As a board member, I'm most passionate about equity, regardless of race, gender, ability, sexuality, anything. I want equity.
Oh, good catch.
So my passion is that I believe every child has gifts, and the job of education is to find those gifts and nurture those gifts.
That's all right. 1 bounce is fine. I am most passionate about ensuring that all of our children have the resources available to them to become the best version of themselves that they can be. Linda, Miss Davis. She just dropped it.
Thank you for recognizing the equity equation and tossing that ball to me. As a board member, I am passionate about honesty, integrity, fidelity, and managing the resources of this district to prepare our children to be the best people that they can possibly be and contribute to this world.
Yeah.
One sentence. Okay, I am, as a board member, I am most passionate about discipline and how it impacts our climate and culture, and specifically how it impacts our most vulnerable populations.
I am passionate about teaching our kids, maybe not even teaching, but having our kids learn and understand and grow, and not just to get grades and do well on tests.
All right, everybody got the ball. Give yourself a hand. No, don't sit down quite yet. All right. Do you remember? Thank you so much. It was really helpful and insightful to hear about all of the passions. And while there were themes, you could definitely hear distinct areas of passion and commitment. Places probably where your ears perk up when that comes up at a meeting. So thank you. Do you remember who you passed it to? Okay. You tried to. All right. So we are gonna test you on whether you remembered that. So take a moment, think about it. And when you're ready, I'm going to ask that you pass that ball and maintain that same sequence. All right. You ready? All right. Let's see. Pass the ball and maintain the sequence. Go for it. All right, we did it. Very good. Nice job. Your audience is impressed. So I have only been to a few board meetings, but I am aware that you all like data. And so we took some data. Dr. Harris. Dr. Harris did a little measuring for us. Dr. Harris, how did they do? 1471. It took you 14.71 seconds to start here and end there. That's pretty good. That's not bad, right? What do you think? Do you want to try and go faster? I've done this activity many times, and I have seen better. But, you know, it's fine. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with 14.71. But what do you think? You think you can do better? Dr. Anderson, what do you think might be a better, reasonable time? 10. Does anybody else believe that you can get this ball around in 10 seconds? Yeah. The rules? 5, 6, step a little bit closer. Okay. I agree. Okay, maintain the sequence, pass the ball. We have a motion to move closer. All right. Dr. Harris is going to again keep time for us. Ms. Gallagher, when you are ready. All right, stop. 563. Blew it out of the water. Set the goal of 10 seconds and beat that by half. Very nice. This is very good. I have seen better, but this is pretty good. Are you happy with your 5 seconds, or would you like one more time to try to do better? You're pretty good. You see what I'm doing. You're happy. It'll do. Okay. With that, we will give yourselves a hand then for 5 seconds. Down from 14, you may have a seat again. Thank you. So who had throw a ball around the room as what your activity for the evening? All right. Well, thank you very much for participating in that. We will come back to it as we go through this presentation, as a metaphor, of course. So the plan, the strategic plan that was passed earlier this year, has multiple components. There are 5 components. You can see them up here, and I want to talk about each of them briefly as a reminder of what is actually in the plan. So there are 5 strategic priorities. You can see them up here. We are going to frame our presentations and our updates within these strategic priorities. Of course, they are big, and no piece of work only falls in one of those. So one of the things that we want to make sure to remind you is that there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of collaboration. There are team leads on these, each of these, but that doesn't mean that they're not talking to each other and that we're, all off in the offices only working on one thing. So there are those 5 priorities. And each priority has a goal, objectives, and initiatives and performance measures that are written out in the goal. But you'll see there in the green box, there are activities and strategies and programs and projects. And oftentimes that's what you all know about or hear about or want to know about. Like, what are we actually doing? What's the work that's being done to meet the initiative, which goes up to the objectives? And we believe that if we do those things, then we will be working on the goal. So that's just sort of a visual. You're not going to see the activities, strategies, programs, and projects listed in the strategic plan, but we're going to be providing you with updates about those as we go throughout the year. So the goal is the big thing that we hope to accomplish within the priority. And just like there are 5 strategic priorities, there are 5 goals. And here they are. So it's really articulating under that priority, what do we hope to do, to have happen? What is the work aimed at? Each goal has objectives. There are 14 total objectives. There are some specific objectives that we could actually go back and say, we wanted to meet a set percent or a number. We wanted to implement a plan or a process. And some objectives could be met, but they also could always be improved. We must always be looking at them. There's probably a continuous improvement cycle where we would go back and we would say, we implemented it or we piloted it, we implemented it, we evaluated it, we tweaked it, and we're monitoring it, and we might be doing things a little differently based on the data that we get. There are initiatives within each of those objectives. There's usually 2 to 4, a total of 41 initiatives, right? So one thing I want to remind everyone here is this is a 3-year plan. It's not going to be in December we checked off all 41 initiatives, right? Over the course of 3 years working on this work. Some of these are well underway and some of them aren't. And that's okay. It's 3 years, but we want to make sure that we have them all down and, of course, are accountable for them, but know that nothing is going to be done in this first year. And then, as I mentioned, activities, not all 41, activities, programs, projects, they all work to meet those objectives. And we can measure the progress of the work on the initiative as well as the result of implementing the initiative. And that gets us to these performance measures. So there are many, many performance measures. Many of them have baseline data, or there will be baseline data as we go throughout the year. We need to set a goal for those performance measures. And some performance measures actually have multiple data points. As we look at one particular one, we might need to break it out. Some of them say something like parents and students. Well, we need to look at parents and we need to look at students, right? So there's a lot of data that will go into those performance measures. What is the purpose of continuously monitoring? I know you all know this, but to bring it to the forefront, we need to hold ourselves accountable. We need to internally hold ourselves accountable and externally to you all, to the community, to the students, to the staff. We want to acknowledge and celebrate progress, and we also want to course correct when that is appropriate. We thought that this particular activity was going to be what we needed. We're not seeing that progress or data shown, so we need to go back. So this brings me back to the ball activity. What do we monitor? So this comes from a book that Dr. Harris gave me, and I think it helps. It's very helpful with its language, right? So those lag measures tell whether we achieved the goal. The lag measure in the ball activity was what? What's the lag measure in the ball activity? You can unmute yourself and tell me.
The time.
The time, right? The lag measure in the ball activity is the time. It's after the fact. It's pretty easy to measure. Dr. Harris had to push start and stop, but then we have a time and we can look and see, did you meet the time? Now, when we didn't ask for you to, when you didn't know we were measuring you, you got a time that was fine, right? It's not terrible. It didn't take us all night. But once you knew we were measuring you, things got better. Why did things get better? What did you do?
You always get what you measure. And so it was easier.
You made adjustments, right? You decided, Ms. Hull over here said, well, I've got a plan. Let's get close together, right? We knew that time. It was fine, but we knew that we could do something differently to get a better time. That's an example of a lead measure. That's a strategy to affect the lag measure. It's the activity that we want to provide you with the updates on throughout the course of the year. Yes, we can tell you about the lag measures, but it's in the past. It can't be influenced. We can't do anything about it after we have it. However, we can do something about the lead measures. We can say, yes, you all should get closer together. We can say, actually, you should reorder yourselves. So all you need to do is stand next to each other and pass the ball. I could ask you to think, what does pass the ball really mean? Are there any room for wiggling on those rules? Could we all stand next to the ball and pass it? Does that count? We could debate about whether that counts, if that's part of the rules, but that is something that we in fact can control and we can influence. And we want to be telling you about both the lead measures and the lag measures. And when the lag measure doesn't meet what we thought it was going to meet, we need to go back and look at those lead measures. So that's what I'm hopeful over the course of these presentations that we can be providing you with information about and updates. These updates hopefully will start to look like a pattern. We want to tell you what is the initiative and why is it important to us? How does it connect to equity? How does it connect to learning? How does it connect to engaging parents? All of those things. What are we going to measure? Where are we now? Do we have any results? What have we seen so far? And where are we going? What could you expect to hear about or check in on in the next 6 to 9 months? So as we go throughout these presentations, there may be adaptations to this template, but the idea is that it will start to sound familiar and you should expect to hear these things when we do these strategic plan updates. We are working on visuals. I know everybody likes a good graph and colors, so we're working on it and thinking about if you wanted to check in on any particular initiative, where would you go? What would that look like? Are we on track? What's the goal for each of those years? And what activities are taking place right now? So that is coming. It's not quite done, but it is in process, and you can hold us accountable for that in the next couple of months. You can hold me accountable for that. All right. Any questions? Yeah.
So I'm usually the one using jargon that nobody understands.
Yeah.
So I appreciate this. So the lead and the lag. I think I got the lag. The lag is what you're measuring without telling us.
Well,
And then the lead is what you say is the stated goal, and so that's what we work towards. I'm still a little
sorry.
confused.
Yeah,
on
we'll
it.
go back to it. All right. The lag measure is it's the performance measure in the plan. It's we want to have some number of students reading on on grade level.
That's the lag.
That's the lag. Because what do we do to measure it? We have them take a test, and then we look back at the test and see, did they make it? Were they reading on grade level? A lag measure might say, well, we want to have, the example I had up here, we want to have 7 schools PBS certified at the end of the year. So at the end of the year, we say, how many schools are PBS certified? It's either 6 or 7. But if it's May 31st and it's only 6, there's not much you can do about getting that last one certified by then. It's over. It's in the past. It's the lag measure. The lead measure is what we're doing to get there. So a good example that's maybe is weight loss, right? I want to weigh a particular weight. And every day I can stand on the scale and say, do I weigh that particular weight? But if I don't make it, there's nothing I can do about it today. But tomorrow I can go for a run or skip breakfast. Those are the activities in which I have control and influence over. And then I can check tomorrow. Did that work? No, I should have skipped breakfast and lunch. Did it work? Maybe I need to run farther. I don't know, right? Maybe I should have eaten breakfast. But those are the activities that we're doing that we can control and we can influence. We will look at the lag measure, but it's the lead measures that's the work that we're doing to affect them. Now, we think that the things that we're doing impact the lag measures or we wouldn't be doing them.
So, Emily, is it almost, oops, we used to kind of talk about formative and summative. So the summative is kind of the autopsy at the end. So it's the milestones. It's where we are when it's over, but then what are the preventive things we're doing along the way that should help us by the summative?
Yeah, except for in the autopsy, they're always dead. So I think so. I mean, it is that way in that there's nothing to be done after the fact. Does that help or still? One of the examples that we talked about was if we had the goal of reducing car crashes in Athens, right? So we could all brainstorm things that we think would be helpful to do that. We could reduce the speed limit. We could, make it so that only you have to be 16 to drive. Maybe those car crashes are happening in 14 or 15-year-olds. We could do all of those things. Those would be our lead measures. We could go about and say we're going to do all of that. But if 300,000 14-year-olds drive around and there's an incredible increase in population, we did everything we said we were going to do, and the car crashes still increased because there's like 1 million more people here. Or we could have done none of it and everybody could have stopped driving because it was a pandemic and the car crashes go down anyway. All of the car crash number is a lag measure. All the things we do are the lead measures to impact the lag measure. I have the book. I can give it to you. Any other questions?
So in your example of, again, implementing PBIS in a certain number of schools, what is that implementation of PBIS trying to get to?
So that's a good question, right? So we believe that the implementation of PBIS, which in this case is an initiative, is going to drive up to the objective, which is going to drive up to the goal. And that is the thinking and the work that was done in the implementation of the strategic plan when it was formulated.
So PBIS should help improve culture and climate ultimately, which is the main priority. PBIS then certain areas it would reduce discipline. It may reduce student feelings, negative feelings or student attachment to school or student engagement in school or staff engagement, perceptions of enjoyment or acceptance, like some of those types of things.
Yeah, it'll all go to the climate and culture. That's the idea. Now, if you disagree with the initiatives or the objectives, we are at this point, the plan is passed and we're going to be working on that plan. In 2024, of course, or as we need to course correct and think about what are the objectives that we no longer believe need to be written down or need to be elevated or are not the objectives, we can go back and look at that.
So we would have to wait until 2004.
Well,
to
I say
change
that sort of, you know,
course.
I think the idea being like we've thought about this and we believe that this is the work that needs to be done. So yes, if it turns out that's not the work that had an impact on climate and control, then the next time we do a strategic plan, we'll think about it in a new way.
So I think I heard you that there's no flexibility in this plan. Like if the end of one objective is doing something, maybe something external happens and that's no longer viable, it's not even reasonable to do, then we're going to live with that for 3 more years, or will we have the ability to make a course correction?
No, I think we
at
would course
evaluation
correct. Yeah.
time, at superintendent's evaluation time, I would think
Yeah.
would be when we would be able to make course corrections.
Yeah. So, and you know, I think we would not do things we don't believe are helpful or strategic.
Well, I'm not suggesting that, but I'm saying some external event might happen that clearly makes this unachievable, unrealistic, measuring the wrong thing. Then there needs to be some flexibility to be able to make an adjustment to that objective.
So it's a living, breathing document. So anytime there's something blatant that, you know, let's just say we were implementing some program and we found out that everything that they said it was going to do, it does the opposite, right? And so we're bringing something in and we think it's culturally sensitive and we get into it and we start finding out that there are significant issues of equity or promoting oppression or whatever. We're not going to continue to do that. We would never say, well, that's in the plan, we're going to stay with it. We would always correct if there's something blatant there, or if you know, anything that, but I think the goal would be to try to stay with something long enough to see if it works. So that's the opposite of that. So frequently we abandon things because we don't see immediate progress and the data doesn't show at the end of one school year what we expected it to show. But instead of looking at how we implemented it, was it done with fidelity? Did we provide teachers with the training that they really needed? Did we give them monitoring support? Frequently we just say, oh, that didn't work, let's just try something else. And we've invested money, we've invested time. So I think that really is what the goal is aimed at, in saying we're going to stay the course to try to give things time to really be effective. If there is something that there again is a blatant reason why, you know, if it's just totally egregious as a product or circumstances change in the world, we say we're doing something with face-to-face and we have to go back to virtual. Yes, we would have to look at, you know, what we do with laptops. So there's always room for correction, but the goal would be to try to actually see something through long enough to give it an opportunity to have an impact. Does that clarify?
That helps me a little bit.
Your mic, Dr. Thanks.
Performance leads and then lag, and then I was waiting for where that modification, you know, like you stated with your example of previous schools, you know, so if only 3, you know, got there, you know, would the next step be to figure out how to work with the principals and staff, or, you know, the discussion you all just had, or do we just keep going with what the plan is? So I was just hoping that there was a next step in there for that modification, not
And
to
some
throw
of
it
that
away.
You would see in the initiative and action. So I look at Mr. Gaskins, those things could change every 6 months. They could change every quarter. They could change every year, because the initiatives and actions are the place where really the rubber meets the road and that actual day-to-day work is happening. Is that accurate, Mr. Gaskins? So there will always be instructional tweaks or implementation tweaks that we have to take, really looking at data, looking at what student needs are showing us, whether that's in terms of behavior and discipline and social emotional needs or academic performance. So those things will always be flexible, because that's really the how we do the work versus the what it is we're trying to accomplish. Right. So the how is always going to be fluid.
Yeah. And the how is not written in the plan. The how is the green box.
Right. Those are the activities and the programs and the projects and the initiatives and that day-to-day work. It's kind of like your lesson plan for any of you in a class. You have your standards and you have what goals you're trying to meet, but you may have to adapt that lesson plan sometimes in the middle of the lesson, because everyone's looking at you with these deer in headlights look, and you're like, nobody, I'm teaching and nobody's learning. So you have to make those instructional real-time adjustments. And that would be the same thing I think is addressing what you're saying, that we have to stop and look and say, wait, this isn't getting it. What do we need to do? So even us having these strategic support circles and those conversations, or looking at data in the middle of the semester or middle of the year at the end of the semester, what is it showing? Okay, what do we need to tweak? Do we need to get more support? Do we need to get the content coaches in working with those teachers? So those would be real in-time changes that happen more in the green box.
I guess I struggle with that gray and green box. That's why I'm confused.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying.
And that's what these updates are going to be.
Bless you.
Yeah. Thank you all.
That was a nice activity. Thank you.
But you did not want to play anymore.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Brandon Gaskins, and I'm most passionate about following opportunity and access for all kids. So I think that as we look at this strategic priority number 1, student achievement, you will see that interwoven in the work that we're doing as a district. So our goal for strategic, sorry, I pointed at the wrong computer. Strategic priority number 1 is to prepare every student for college and career success. So our goals and objectives we have for this priority, we have 3. The first is to increase the number of students who demonstrate progress as measured by student growth percentile on state and district ELA and mathematics assessments. And so simply put, student growth percentile is a growth measure, meaning that our goal for every student is to have at least 1 year of growth per year. Research says that the further behind a student is, the more they need to grow. So students that do not come in on grade level, they need to have 1.5 years or up to 2 years of growth in 1 year. Our second objective is that at least 90% or more 8th grade students will be high school ready. And then our second objective is to ensure that all high school seniors graduate college and career ready. Sorry. So as we have the conversation about goals and objectives, in this graphic, to your right, the yellow column, increase the number of students who demonstrate progress. That is the objective. So that's what we just talked about. And then those bullets that are below represent the strategies and initiatives. So the first is to increase the number of students receiving early Head Start, and pre-K learning, implement balanced literacy and mathematics instructional blocks with fidelity, provide high quality standards-based curriculum resources to all students, provide professional development for teachers, and then implement a multi-tiered system of support framework for all students. So this is an example of what we're doing now. We hope and we're monitoring that these initiatives are impactful. And to Dr. Thomas's earlier comment, if they're not impactful, this is where we modify in real time these initiatives to support the objective and then ultimately support the goal. So in the second column, which is a middle school goal of 90% more of our 8th graders being high school ready, we will provide students with a comprehensive school counseling plan focused on rigorous course selection, pathway selection, and completion and successful course completion, provide access to high school courses for all students, provide high quality standards-based curriculum resources to all students, and then provide the appropriate professional development for teachers, and then implement a multi-tiered system of support framework for all students, which is also known as MTSS. The last objective is focused on high school students and to ensure that they are college and career ready. So the first initiative is to implement a 9th grade academy. This 9th grade academy is really focused on students not failing 1 or more courses during their freshman year, and then increasing the GPA of our freshman students. The second initiative is providing students with a comprehensive school counseling plan, similar to that plan of our middle school students. increase the subgroup participation and completion and successful course completion for our high school students, and then increase the number of students taking end of pathway assessments, which is our EOPA. So one way we are monitoring and supporting our schools is through a framework that we have named our strategic support circles. So what is the strategic support circle? So this is a method by which school leadership share current strengths and challenges. They seek input and help on specific issues, and they implement their 90-day plan. So each school is aware of our strategic plan goals, and they have specific goals in their 90-day plan that is related to our strategic plan. So the reason that we have implemented the strategic support circles is we want to ensure that all schools provide periodic and consistent updates. So we do not want to go through an entire year not knowing how a school is doing academically, doing with their behavior, or any barriers they have to increase student outcomes. And so schools are held accountable for their progress, and district staff provide direct supports for barriers to learning. So in the strategic support circles, the components is there is a leadership presentation to cabinet. So all of our cabinet members are present for these presentations, including some of our executive staff members as appropriate. We look at real-time data, the appropriate data that they have in ELA and math. We also look at their 90-day action plan to ensure that the things that they said that they are implementing, if they have a barrier to its implementation, we are there to provide support. Schools present in cohorts or in pairs, and sometimes triads. So if there's a school that is having a lot of success in an area at their school, there are other schools there hearing about their success so they can implement those strategies in their school as well. And then our principal meetings, assistant principal meetings, our instructional coach meetings always include environmental walks as part of our learning, so we can actually go to schools and see what they are doing in classrooms. Today, as a part of our strategic support, I was at Clark Middle School today. I visited all of their math classes as a part of something that came out of our strategic support and related to our strategic plan. So this is an example of a slide that is included in their presentation. So this is a middle school example. This is a slide that is related to the achievement in ELA and reading. So on the left side, you will see the school's current data as it relates to their reading achievement, which was from their diagnostic assessment. And that on the left side in the middle, we provide them with a district data analysis. So based on district data, this is what we're seeing in comparison of your school. At the bottom, the school has an opportunity to give a school data analysis. So they're meeting as an admin team, as a team of lead teachers to discuss the data as well. On the right side, they update us on their progress so far. So here's your data, here's your challenges. What are you doing to move this data? And so they go through that. You can see that there are things that are hyperlinked that they're able to share with us, and we provide them with feedback. And then they tell us about next steps. So there's a chart like this for reading. There is one for mathematics. There's also one for discipline. There is another for culture and climate. And there's also a slide that highlights the support that they need from our operations, our human resource, and our finance departments. So all of the chiefs are there. We have these PowerPoint slides ahead of time, so we can read through these PowerPoints. Our principals are not shy about requests that they have as it relates to supporting their school. So for example, a school may say, my teachers are struggling with the implementation of our new math resource at middle school. And so it's my job to say, okay, I have a coordinator of math. When do you want her to come to your school? When do you want her to sit with your math coach? When would you like for her to visit all of your classrooms and provide you with support? We schedule that day so it doesn't fall through the cracks, so we can make sure that we're moving and progressing towards their goal. Something else that we provide is a slide that shows the mutual accountability. So at the top, it says action steps identified at the last meeting. So what were the action steps related to ELA, math, attendance, culture and climate, behavior, the documented support and resources from the district. So in the middle, this is what the district said that they were going to do. And then on the right side, the progress made since the last meeting. This is where we need help. This is what the district said that they were going to do. And then here's the progress that we made since the last meeting. So what we are measuring during our strategic support circles, again, the progress of their 90-day plan, their overall performance on specific measures towards the end of the year, and then we're also measuring the response to schools' requests for direct support. So we are very, very laser focused, and Dr. Thomas provides us with space at our cabinet meeting to make sure that if we said that we were going to provide support to a school, that we've provided that support. Our schools are tiered, so we meet with every school as well as our Office of Early Learning, our Athens Community Career Academy, as well as Classic City High School and our Alt Ed school. We meet with all schools. So we have what we call Tier 3 support schools. That's 8 schools. So we've identified those schools based on their academic data and the experience of their leaders in the building. We've already met with them twice this year, and we will meet with them 4 more times. So in all, if a school is receiving Tier 3 support, they have 6 formal meetings with cabinet to update us on their progress with their academic, student achievement data, discipline data, and culture and climate data. So if the other schools will meet with us 4 times a year. We've already met with them once, and we have 3 more opportunities to formally meet with them, where they will have the audience with cabinet to give us an update on their student achievement data and academic data, discipline, culture, and climate. So the feedback that we've received so far from school leadership is the rapid responses to academic and operation needs, including finance and human resources. So it is great to be able to talk to the chief that is in charge of X. So for example, we notice a pervasive issue as it was relating to discipline on the school bus. And so Dr. Watley was able to be present to talk to what can we do about some of the discipline that we are experiencing on the school bus, as well as Marsha Thomas. And there was a plan crafted before the end of the day. We were able to deploy Ms. Utivia Tolbert to work with our bus drivers in that area. That is an example of something that's systemic that our schools brought forward, that multiple cabinet members and executive staffs were able to thought partner and provide a strategy to address that. The other feedback that is a strategic focused support. So instead of saying our teachers need professional development, we are able to talk with teachers, with instructional coaches about what strategically do you need? What's that one thing you need, just not in general? And there's opportunity to learn from what other schools are implementing. The feedback that we receive from our central office staff is clear communications between schools and departments. So sometimes the needs get lost in the sauce. Sometimes people are speaking to members in our department, and sometimes the chief needs to hear the exact concern that the school is having. Clear and actionable next steps for the departments. We're able to clarify what actually do you need. We can articulate that with principals before they leave that day. And then opportunities to reflect on each department's actions impact on student achievement. So this is a student achievement priority, but everyone is at the table as we support student achievement. So as we just kind of think about the results of this implementation, because we have lots and lots of data, but not data about our progress so far, in January, we'll be able to update the board on our student growth percentile. Actually, we'll be able to do that in December before you enjoy your holiday, because our schools are taking that diagnostic assessment in December versus January. So we'll have SGP data and ELA and math for our kindergarten through 8th grade students. We'll also have proficiency data in ELA and math for our K through 8 students. And in high school, we'll have our course passage rate. And then I neglected to include, we'll also have our EOC data, because there are several high school courses that have EOCs in the first semester. So at this time, thank you, and I will take any questions that you have.
Is that accurate data for COIL? Is that current data?
That is current data for COIL. So we use COIL as our example, and that is their current data that they presented at our meeting last month.
And the climate there is?
That wasn't climate data, that was their ELA data.
Yeah. What is the climate data? Do we know?
We do know what their climate data is. We did not include that in the presentation. We have that data that we could provide.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
So when we look at the example of the goals, this is some really good information. So thank you for the presentation. For the middle school goal that says at least 90% or more 8th grade students will graduate, or excuse me, will be high school ready. Do we have some type of measurement of what high school ready is? Because my 8th graders definition and my definition could be very different.
Yes. So we are, and I'm just pulling it up for my own reference. We have not talked about CCRPI in a very long time, but CCRPI does provide what we call a readiness score. I'm looking at my computer. Can I drive on your, is that? Okay.
While he's pulling that up, Ms. Gallagher, he got your 8 questions, and some of them I think he addressed, but the ones that aren't, we will get answers to you. You're welcome. We looked at them today together.
How does COIL compare to the other middle schools?
Depends on which measure we're talking about. It has varied in some areas, BHL, and I don't want to speak off the cuff because I'm not looking at that exact data.
You don't have to answer that.
Yes, it fluctuates depending on which measurement we're talking about.
So this is the CCRPI website. This data is delayed, but it does show the different categories that we look at. So as we talk about being high school ready, there is a readiness measure for elementary, middle, and high. This is the middle school readiness level. And so it looks at literacy, it looks at attendance, and it looks at this category, which is called Beyond the Core. So in the Beyond the Core, it looks at the percentage of students that are passing their fine arts classes, passing their world language, meaning they need to take a world language and then pass it, passing their PE class, and passing a career connections class. And it also looks at literacy. So are they reading on grade level? So if those students are reading on grade level, coming to school, passing these classes, then they are considered high school ready. The other question, and I believe Ms. Gallagher, this was to your question around how do we know that our students are college and career ready, it's the readiness measure for our high school, which is a little more dynamic, but similar. So we have a literacy rate. Are our high school students reading on grade level? Are they coming to school? Are they taking accelerated enrollment? So it's the student taking at least one of these, a dual enrollment class, an AP class, and we don't provide IB courses. The other thing that is important is pathway completion. Pathway completion just doesn't include CTAE. It's the advanced academic pathway completion, it's fine arts, or world language. One of those, not all of those. And then there's a specific college and career readiness. And Ms. Gallagher, I think this goes to another one of your questions. We keep data on our students that graduate. So this first one, it says students entering TCSG, USG without needing remediation. So we know the number of students that we send to college and the percentage of those students that have to take a remedial course. That is something that we track through what we call our clearinghouse data. It also, college and career readiness also looks at the readiness score for our students on the ACT, the SAT, if they make at least a 3 or more on the AP exam, and then an IB course. And then if the student has passed their end of pathway assessment. So we use these measures to determine, are we sending our students to school, college ready? Are they college and career ready? Or are we sending them from middle school to high school ready?
That was very helpful. Thank you. And I just have one more question. And I'm not sure if it would be you or maybe a group of the chiefs, but when we look at or when progress is discussed in the strategic circles, is it encouraged that if there is no progress that there's reported? I'm asking about, this is a marathon, right? So there may be not immediate progress that is visible or able to be articulated. Is that type of information something that is encouraged so that teachers or principals won't fear any type of bad evaluation or any type of measures like that?
Yes, and so that's a great question, and that's exactly what we want it to be. So not going to the past, but I had to do a little research before we started the strategic support circles. And in the past, we had something similar, and there was a lot of anxiety that was related to it. So the first thing, and I hope that I answer your question, is that the school and what we call their principal supervisor and their ILTs, they create this presentation together. So really, it's not a surprise to us when they're presenting, and we want them to feel very confident about the things that they are presenting. And so the principal supervisor will say, we notice that there is not growth in this area. When you get to your strategic support circle, you need to ask for support in this area. So it's not a, you're not moving, why not? It's you're not moving, what support do you need?
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Mm-hmm. So I have, it's the support and accountability. So we're going to support you, but we're also going to have this way of holding you accountable next to the support that we provide you.
And in the past, it was not being judgmental, but it was kind of a lag process because we did it in the spring when it was almost too late to make changes and corrections. So it was kind of, what have you done all year? Where are you now? And it was more just a where are you versus a where are you and how can we help to address where you are and help to move you farther along. And in the past, we really just looked at it's March or April, sometimes May, and we would do a evaluation presentation to the district staff. But at that point, it was really just looking at the data and what had we done all year, but no opportunity to make change and adjustments. So that I hope that principals appreciate that it's early on, it's not for evaluation purposes, and it really is about tell us what you need so we can help you get where you're trying to go.
And I think even for me and Dr. Thomas and the rest of cabinet, sometimes we say, this is something that we need to see. So we make decisions all the time, but sometimes we actually need to get into that classroom to see and provide some root cause analysis for the leader around maybe why something is not moving in the way that we think that it should. Or we encourage principals to visit other schools that are making gains and they may have similar populations.
And I've liked how, so the principals usually come and they hear the school that goes before them, and then they stay and listen to the school that goes after them. And I hope that's been helpful just in getting ideas and listening to each other, and then them having conversations. Now, I heard you say that at wherever, at JJ Harris, you're doing this. Fowler may say, can I come watch that? Or can you share some resources with me? Or you know, I heard you all offer this to this other school. I hadn't thought about that, but that's something I could benefit from. So that collaboration and sharing of resources and practices, we hope has been helpful too. And Ms. Davis had asked about some data, and we can get that for those middle schools.
Yes, ma'am.
If it's coming off the DOE website, I just hadn't been out there in a while. I can go up there and take a look.
And some of that is older data, but it still gives you an idea. Yes.
I would like to see a current view.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I had a question about like some of the initiatives. How much autonomy do teachers and principals have? Like, you know, they have the objective that the district is trying to meet. How much autonomy do they have, for instance, like at a particular school, if they feel that they're like a unique set, you know, of needs based on the students that they are serving?
So that is really in the work of their 90-day plan. So for example, we have what we call big rocks, meaning this is our focus. So for example, we are focused on instructional leadership. And instructional leadership includes this implementation of the balanced literacy and math block. So schools are in different places in that, in the implementation of that. And so I was having the conversation with the principal today that success for your school is not going to be the implementation of every single component of the math resource. You have to start small, and that's going to be success for you, and that's going to be okay. Where in another school where they've been using the resource for a while, they don't have as many new teachers, and that principal says, I want to implement all 4 components of our Carnegie math. That is something that we also support. So we hold tight to what we call the big rock, meaning the overarching goal that we have as a district. How they get there is really the autonomy of the principal as he or she works with their team.
Okay. And then I guess my follow-up question, and this is probably related, I think, to Ms. Davis and maybe Ms. Gallagher, but like for the example that was provided here, where we have just that brief snapshot of the discipline data analysis. I think it was with COIL. And like that comparison of fall 2020 with fall 2021, like having the positive of that stability, even, you know, going between the school years. But when we see like that percentage of students that are reading on grade level, and then the ones that are, you know, to a more below grade level, but we see already usage up. And I know that this is still fairly new, right? So it's not something that, you know, that one would make a decision on right then. I guess my question is sort of similar to the earlier one. At what point do we say, okay, this is a lot of data, a lot of different pieces here. And with the goals and the initiatives, something is not getting us where we need to be. At what point do you all feel that we do that? I know that there's a very fine line between like doing it so quickly that you can't quite measure it. So I don't know. I guess it's sort of, my question is, how does the district determine, you know, at what point, you know, you talk about like when we decide to pivot and stop, how do we determine that? And even more so, how do we determine it if we're just eyeballing the data, but we don't have any statistical analysis other than what the descriptives are, right? And what we see is like averages and percentages, but we're not at a place where we can say, okay, these conditions held steady, you know, and this may be a confounding variable here. These may be other things that are going on. So in the absence of that, or a statistician or someone looking and saying, okay, what other things may be at work here? How do we decide as a district, like when it's time to, you know, say, okay, we're going to pull this program and we're going to modify this program?
So I will say this data is data that we took in August. So I think the data that we look at in December, that is where we need to start having those conversations, because the things that schools have implemented have been since that we had this data. So we took this data snapshot, and then schools decided these are some of the things that we need to work on to improve this data. And we won't have similar data to this until December. not to say that there's not data that is being collected. So for the example that you gave, that's on here about iReady usage is up. So I saw that iReady usage is up because that was something that was listed. But then I also listed to see the percentage of students that were passing those courses in iReady, and that was different from this.
Okay.
So that's a conversation that we have. Dr. Thomas knows, and the district knows, that a school presented 15 billion things that they were doing. And I said, stop right there. That's too much. We're doing too much, right? So I think because of the experience of our cabinet, sometimes we see when schools are going down a path that may not be the best. And we see that play out in other ways, like culture and climate of their school or attendance of their teachers. And we have conversations with them around that. But our data and research director, Mr. Barlaman, he's always triangulating data and bringing the data to our attention to say, hey, Mr. Gaskins, I think that this school is not implementing this program in the right way, or we're noticing this pattern in all of our schools related to the program or the initiative that we use. And then I bring that to cabinet to have that conversation, or I bring that to my team so we can do further investigation, because we have to see it, called going to the GIMBA. We have to actually be there to see how it's been implemented or what the gaps are, and then we make those decisions. I think something that I'm extremely proud of is how we have structured our principal, AP, and instructional coach meetings. We go to the school. The school that I went to last week was Barrow Elementary. We visited several classes at that school. Dr. Sabatini said, this is what my challenge is. She identified the challenge. I did not identify the challenge for her. This is what I want feedback on. And she was open to that feedback. And we told her, maybe this is something you need to stop doing. Maybe this is something that you need to continue doing. And that was feedback from me. That was feedback from her principal colleagues. And then she took those notes to share with her teacher leaders later that day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I got one.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
got two. Okay, so when you pulled up the CCRPI data, I really just want to ask, are we making data-driven decisions? Because if only 30% of the students, because our overarching goal is to graduate students college and career ready, if we're only sending 30% of students to school who don't have to take remedial classes, are we really graduating students college and career ready? And so my question is, are we making data-driven decisions when it comes to the strategic plan, going backwards, looking at, even if this is old data, still data, going backwards and making decisions so that we can improve these outcomes?
Yes, ma'am. And that is a reason that is a part of our strategic plan. So as we worked on creating our strategic plan, we identified things that we were not doing well in. And one of the things that we're not doing well in is sending our students, or when our students leave, they're not college and career ready. And so having it as a part of our strategic plan, number one, makes us focus on it. And then number two, we spend a lot of time educating, or we should be spending a lot of time educating our parents and our teachers around why these measures are so important. So we do agree that we have areas of growth to ensure that our students are college and career ready. And by making sure that we're measuring that, I think that, supports that being a priority of ours.
Okay, I got a follow-up. My follow-up is, does the district currently, or would the district somewhere in the future, create our own standards matrix of whether or not students are college and career ready, not just base it on what, something national or statewide says, but if we could say, well, the state says this, then we want to exceed that. And so here are some things that we're implementing so that we are doubly making sure that our students are.
As long as we're exceeding it, I think that is fine. I think that these are really rigorous measures. I think that working towards these measures would serve us well. I think if there are opportunities to modify these to to have additional measures or maybe something that is specific to Clark County that may not be articulated in the readiness measure. I think we have an opportunity to do that and should do that. But I think that these are really rigorous measures, and not putting too much on the school, I think focusing on these would serve us well. Because the interesting thing about this, Ms. Gallagher, and I would welcome any board member to schedule a one-on-one meeting with me, students need to do at least one of these things, not all of these things. And we have students that are not doing any of these things. So one of the examples is end of pathway assessment, and I saw your question related to this. So our students will take 3 courses in a pathway and not sit for the assessment. And so not that we want every kid to take a pathway, I do, but I'm not going to mandate that. But when they do take 3 courses in a pathway, it only benefits them if they take the industry certification. It doesn't hurt them. The same thing with the ACT. We provide the ACT to every single student for free in our district. And then we provide additional waivers for students. But we have a lot of students that are not meeting the minimal readiness score. So I think if we just focus on those 2 things, that would be a lot of work for teachers and for leaders, because those things are really dynamic things that take a lot of time to improve.
I think the reason why, I know the reason why I asked about having our own, like the CCSD specific, is because passing a end of pathway or participating in an end of pathway assessment, or participating in CTAE or taking a fine arts class doesn't determine whether or not a child will need remediation. So reading and math are the courses that we end up in remediation in. So addressing that before we worry about pathways or CTAE. And I know fine arts plays a major role in a student's ability to read or do math. But
So
we also have cut funding for those programs.
So the literacy, if Lisa, if you could scroll up, because this is a long list, Ms. Gallagher, the literacy, or scroll down, I'm sorry. Literacy is on here as an indicator of college and career readiness. So we are focused on literacy. And then I would also say that the math that our students take in high school is going to be replicated and assessed in their ACT or SAT. So those measures are there, they're embedded, but they're still a focus of ours.
Okay. So maybe it's just that green box on their initial thing that Ms. Bonnet shared that needs to be adjusted, because we still don't have children that can read and do math when they get to college. So assessing it is one thing, but making sure that we're following all the steps to make sure that they can actually do it.
Yes, ma'am. And so I think where we have identified it, and the update that we can provide to the board is around this counseling plan that we provide to each and every one of our students. So in that counseling plan, those are the things that we want to make sure that we're identifying, that our counselor has articulated to the parent and to the student around what it means to be career and college ready, and then the programming that we can provide at the school. So when they do choose to go to the military, because you still have to take a test to get into the military, or to college, or if they don't choose to do those things, the things they need to do to be industry certified to go to work, they know that it's not a surprise. So even with like the welding exam where we certified those 14 students, there's math related to that welding exam. So I think just having that counseling plan and giving students as much knowledge and their parents as much knowledge is what our plan is.
Thank you.
You're
I'll
welcome.
send you an email to schedule.
Okay.
Thank
It's my favorite thing to talk about. Yes, ma'am.
I had a couple questions about, let's see, I guess they're initiatives. So the prepare every student, so the yellow, green, and blue boxes. Yeah, that one. So can you, you just used this in a sentence a minute ago, implement balanced literacy and mathematics instruction blocks with fidelity. Can you tell me what that means? Because I don't really know what that means.
So in our balanced literacy block, there are different components of balanced literacy. There's the phonics instruction, there's shared reading, there's guided reading, there's writing instruction. So we want to make sure that first, all of our students are receiving all of those components as it relates to literacy. And then we want to make sure that we are ensuring that our students are receiving their full mathematics block. And so when we say with fidelity, that we've noticed through our creating the strategic plan that sometimes those things are implemented inconsistently. So sometimes you'll go into a classroom and a teacher, especially at an elementary, which is the reason that it's an elementary goal, is very versed in literacy and they have a literacy rich environment and not as much attention goes to math. We want to make sure that that is balanced. The other thing about these instructional blocks is that the conceptual skills that students need to know and be able to do must be addressed. And so sometimes you may see in math, things are just purely procedural, but that doesn't benefit our kids. So we want to make sure that not only do they get the procedural skills that are a part of the standard, but they also get the conceptual skills that are part of the standard. So that goal is really making sure that we are implementing literacy and math the way it is intended, based on the standard and not based on what a teacher may be good in or what a teacher may want to spend more time in rather than another subject.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Mhm.
The other question I had was the implement a ninth grade academy. Haven't we done that already?
Yes, so we're implementing a ninth grade academy, but we wanted to be very specific about what that meant. And so in this ninth grade academy, we want to make sure that students are not failing one or more courses and that they have an increased GPA of, that we increase their freshman GPA. So we have one in practice, but we want to bring some more
Okay.
structure around it.
So it's not the implementing the academy, it's implementing the academy focused on these
Focused.
things.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank
Yep.
you. I
Mhm.
understand now. Thank you very much.
And I was going to say that because, like with many things, you start it out and you do it in a fairly pure form, but the more you're doing it, sometimes you start to pull away from that, and then a lot of things are done more in name than in actual intention and really focusing on what the goals are of that program.
Okay.
And, we had a conversation, and I had a conversation even with some of our high school leaders. What are you doing differently in ninth grade than you're doing with other grades? And what was that like 5 or 7 years ago when you started it, when it was almost kind of like a middle school model, when those teachers really worked together and they talked about those kids and they planned around those kids and they had really focused peer cohort activities, but those teachers were sitting and saying, we're teaching this 100 kids or 500 kids or whatever, what are we doing collectively to meet the needs? And just as time has gone, we've really moved away from those practices that made it successful in the beginning, and it's become a title more than a true peer practice.
That's interesting. Okay.
And then the other thing to add, and I appreciate this question, Dr. Yeager, that it's targeted with their peer cohort. So we will graduate kids. If a kid doesn't graduate in 4 years, we'll get them through on the 5th year or even the 6th year. What our research shows is that when kids graduate with their cohort, they actually will go to the military, they will go to college, they will go to work with industry certification. Sometimes the longer that a student is in school, the less likely will do something after school. They've been in school a long time, and so they may not want to go to college or community college because of the time they spent trying to get out of their high school.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can I ask one more about the green one?
Yeah.
So I'm still trying to understand, and I know there's a lot of support for teaching high school courses in middle school can you just help me one more step to figure out why that's a good thing? Are we inspiring curiosity? Are we motivating them to do something? What's the kernel of reason behind accelerating them that way?
So there's really two reasons. One is related to physical science at the 8th grade level, and then the other is kind of connected to that. So as we think about physical science, 8th grade content is physical science. 9th grade physical science is physical science. And so what we've noticed is that those courses are very similar, and we always provided the option of students taking physical science, and either students were pushed to take physical science or their parents signed them up for physical science, and we were unintentionally not providing equitable access to physical science, because if you were not aware that those classes were the same or that your student could get a high school credit for physical science, as a parent, you may not have signed your kid up for physical science. They're very similar. And so what we also noticed is that when students took physical science, regardless of their academic level, if they were in the gifted program or they were a general ed student, they always did better on the high school physical science than the 8th grade physical science. We had single-digit proficiency at all 4 middle schools in 8th grade physical science, because we had kids that said, I'm taking high school, teachers saying, I'm teaching high school, and there was a very much a seriousness to that course. And then those students, for whatever reason, took the 8th grade physical science, did not take that course seriously. So we have created a structure where all of our kids will take high school physical science. If students are not doing well in high school physical science, because those courses are so similar, they will not have to sit for the EOC. They will not have to accept the grade of the high school physical science, so that won't impact their GPA. And then they'll be able to take the 8th grade milestone that is related to physical science. So we are providing access and opportunity. And if they don't do well their 8th grade year in physical science, they take it in 9th grade. So it's like they've taken 2 years or a year and a half, because we're in a 4x4 block in high school in physical science. The other part of it is that when students take high school courses in middle school, that gives them more autonomy and flexibility to take more rigorous courses when they get to high school. We have quite a few students that fail algebra and 9th grade ELA in high school, so they have to take it again. And so physical science is a course that, not that it's an easy course, but it has a higher passage rate. So when a student has to retake a course, they're not taking all core classes. They can take an elective with a class that they're repeating. And it's just not physical science. We have a ton of kids that are taking a world language. We have kids that are taking ag science, which is a career, a CTAE course at the middle school level. So then when they get to the high school level, they have more opportunities to take AP classes, or when they take dual enrollment, they have more flexibility in the dual enrollment courses that they choose to take.
I think I finally got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just have one quick follow-up. So if they take the 8th grade physical science, it doesn't count toward high school credits, right?
I'm sorry, ask your question again, Ms.
If a
Davis.
student takes 8th grade physical science, it doesn't count toward their graduation credits, right?
Right.
Okay, and so I don't know if that's a factor, but as soon as they do the 9th grade, it does count, and so we get a better result. All right. So the 8th grade is a kind of a prep course, or is that how they're treating it? It's what it sounds like to me, but anyway. That's rhetorical. Don't answer.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. I know that the progress graph you put up is just for example, but when I look at it, I was struck by that not only are there a high number of students who are 2 or more grade levels below, but at the same time, only 6% of those students are failing ELA, which means 94% of them are passing ELA while also being 2 or more grades below reading level. And not at all that I want people to be failing ELA, but it seems like that's a really big discrepancy. So they don't seem to be measuring the same thing at all. And I don't know if you have a sense of why that is, whether iReady is not accurately measuring their performance, or the students aren't performing on it as they would be or as they could be, or if there are reasons why. I guess my bigger concern is like passing students who are 2 or more years below grade level, and then they will continue to be 2 or more years below grade level because now they're passing on to higher content.
So your question is?
I guess I was wondering what you think that the discrepancy might be, or ways to address that.
So that is part of, and I don't want to just focus on this school because I think that we have
Sure. Yeah.
some other examples of where grades are not aligned with what we see on assessments, and not that either one defines alone defines how the student is doing. I think that grading is a tough one because grading can be subjective, and teachers sometimes provide things that are too rigorous and students don't do well on them, or sometimes grades reflect behavior, which we don't support, but that is something that happens. And so we continue to have conversations about grading. Grades matter most in high school. And so we have conversations with our middle school teachers and our middle school leaders a lot around grades, because they're very serious about grades and what should be graded and when we turn things in and when we don't turn things in. But really, I think if we're trying to assess mastery of standards, we have to do that through multiple ways of triangulating data through multiple assessments, and not assessment just like a quiz or assessment with milestones, but more formative assessments that teachers give in the classroom. And I think that sometimes grades are about completion of tasks and not really assessing the progress of the standard. So it's an issue in truth in grading, and not the teacher being untruthful in grading, but truth in grading is a term really about the alignment to what students are expected to be able to do as it relates to the standard, and then how they're being graded, because parents want to know how their kids are doing. And sometimes an A and a B doesn't accurately convey, this is actually how my child is doing. I will also say, and I know this is not your question, Dr. Dykeman, but sometimes I was meeting with a parent just the other day, and they were telling me about their student's assessment score. And what I told them, which they didn't know, is that when a student is proficient or distinguished on the milestone, that doesn't mean that they got 80% of the assessment correct. It means that they got more like 60% of the assessment correct. And so I think there's sometimes this rub between, I see a 60 and in my mind that means F, but really in the way that an assessment like iReady or MAP or Beacon assesses a student, something from like a 65 up really represents proficiency. So I would, again, I think the most dynamic data I'll be able to share with you all is the growth data, that we'll see how students are growing, and then the proficiency data, like how many kids are proficient. And we'll be able to see that next month.
And yeah, I mean, I appreciate looking at multiple measures. I wouldn't want them to be judged just based on one measure or milestones. I know that those are the measures that are the state measures and things that are looked at, though, and they are ways that the students and the schools and the district are evaluated. So I know that those come up a lot, and there are ones that are easy to sort of pull and say, oh, we have this many children who are reading below grade level. I guess my bigger question is, is that really reflective of where the students are? And I don't know how to get at that, because it seems like there, whatever this number is, I can't quite see it because my eyes are bad. More than 75% of them are 2 or more grade levels below. Yet if you look at grades, which would be another measure, that would show something completely opposite of that. And then, so how do we really know where the students are?
That's a great question. I think we will know more when we give the second diagnostic in December, because the teachers, number one, have taught the kids a whole semester, so they know how students are performing in their class. And then I think that the diagnostic assessment is going to tell us two things. It's going to tell us, one, was this first data set off because our students came back from a pandemic and then they took this very early in the school year. And then it's also going to tell us the skills. And I think that the skills are more important than a letter grade. We do have standards-based report cards in elementary, which focuses on standards and not just the grade. I think that gives a better kind of assessment of how our students are doing. I would not just look at the grade and say my kid is doing fine. And that's why we do ask parents, teachers to provide the, I can't remember what the name of the report is, but there's a standards report that is in iReady that says this is the standards that your kid is doing well in, this is the standard that your kid needs some extra support in, and this is what I'm doing to help your kid. I think that is a better report than just having a report card that has an A, B, or C.
I have one question, and that's it. Because I know you've been up there for a minute. You're probably very fatigued. Can you talk a little about the high quality standard-based curriculum resources? And when you say provide, is this substantially different than what the district was doing last year or the year before? And if there's now a leap to provide this new thing, what does that look like, and what was it based on?
So we have just adopted in recent time 2 curriculum resources, or a couple of curriculum resources, math and ELA. So math, K-5 is Eureka, which I think we're in our second implementation of. And in middle school is Carnegie Learning, which is math, which we adopted last year. And then we adopted Kindle Hunt, which is a resource for algebra and geometry in high school. So there are still other contents that are yet to be adopted, such as science and social studies. One of the things that we've learned from our strategic support circles is that our ELA resource, although it is a great resource for guided reading and shared reading, it doesn't provide what teachers need for phonics instruction. So that is something that we're working on in the background now to make sure that we're listening to teachers, and then that we're doing a process to add phonics instruction. So we're not replacing anything that we just purchased that is new, which is those math curriculums. And then we adopted an ELA curriculum at our middle school level. We're adding the ones that we have not adopted. So that would be science and math at all levels. And then there are several courses in our high schools that we have not adopted in recent time. And then the second part of this initiative is to provide professional development to teachers that is ongoing. So although some of our curriculums are in their second year of implementation, we still need to be able to provide ongoing professional development for those teachers. And then when we have new teachers, to make sure that we're also providing professional development for those teachers.
And has Eureka and Carnegie, and I can't remember the other one that you stepped
Kindle
on,
Hunt.
Kindle Hunt, have they so how long have they been in the system?
Because I was gonna jump in and say for a while we had math standards like K1, K1, 2, but we didn't even have a curriculum when and I haven't been out of the building that long, we did not have a math curriculum for those early grades, which was problematic because you kind of left it to each teacher, so there was no, um, yes, thank you, that was the word I was looking for, no consistency across the district because we did not have. So even when I see that, just saying we have a curriculum because we haven't for a while. We did not have. But I'm sorry, I don't.
No,
wanna
I will
mute
say
myself.
I started in March of 2019 and we did not have any curriculum resources. That August, we adopted Eureka for K2 as a pilot. 3, 8 still did not have an adopted curriculum. And so then that following year in COVID, we implemented all of those new curriculums that we just spoke of. And we were hesitant because of COVID to implement those, but our teachers and our principals said we've gone without resources. We can't wait. And the success of Eureka has been, I would say, more successful than Carnegie and Kindle because of the pilot that we did at K2. So we had to train less teachers, and our principals were more familiar with the resource because they had it at the kindergarten and second grade for at least a year before we adopted it system-wide.
And so that's why you mentioned that you want to include teacher professional development in all of the levels.
Yes.
Is to support these standardized.
Yes. And really with with any textbook adoption, you want to use a resource for 3 to 5 years. We've gotten good feedback from our teachers so far related to those resources. As I said earlier, I was at Clark Middle School for the specific purpose of observing the implementation of the Carnegie learning resources and getting feedback from those instructional coaches and principal that walk those classrooms with me to see, number one, are we using it? If we're not using it, what's the barrier to its use? And then what are some additional professional development that we need? And when you all approved the purchase of Carnegie Learning and Eureka and a lot of the different things that we do, we always include the professional development. And with Carnegie and Eureka, the reason that teachers and leaders chose it is that we actually have individuals from those companies come and train our teachers in the use of the resource. So instead of teachers having to watch something online, we actually have our person, her name is Janet. She will actually go to every teacher's classroom, observe them with the instructional coach, give them feedback. She unpacks the box for them to show them all of the materials that they have. She models lessons for the teachers so they can actually see the successful implementation of the resource with our kids.
Can I ask one more thing? I'm sorry. And then we can just talk offline at some point. So with these the packaged curricula, and I know that you all have the circles of support where you speak with leadership about what resources that they need. Is the information about the teacher's reception and applicability in the classroom and how well they can implement it and whether or not it relates back to iReady assessments and all of that, is that getting communicated up so that you are getting correct and timely information from teachers?
It is. So I will go back and say, when we selected any of these resources, our math resources, our supplemental resource, iReady, teachers, instructional coaches, and school leaders who served on that committee, they selected those things. So it wasn't something that we said, this is something that we want to do. We created a selection committee that selected those things. In the selection committee, going back to SGPs and connecting it, we selected teachers that had increased student outcomes in their classroom. So it's one thing to say, hey, I want to be on the selection committee, but we wanted people that were knowledgeable and versed in the content to be able to select those resources that we have. The other thing is teachers don't mind calling or emailing us. So they call, they email, things come directly from teachers, things also come directly from principals. The other thing is that we have our teacher advisory board. So we met with our teacher advisory board. They wanted to give us feedback on our professional development that we were providing. One of the things that they said is they don't want a train-the-trainer model. They don't want someone training a coach or a teacher to redeliver to them. They want that person that has the expertise to deliver directly to them. And so that's Amy Peacock is our executive coordinator of professional learning. She gave me that feedback. I shared that with Dr. Thomas. It might be a little more expensive. So if you see that come up for approval, you know why. But we do get feedback because we want our teachers to be successful in implementing the resource. And the last thing that I will say about it, and I know Dr. Thomas, we're running on time, is that I forgot what I was going to say. It was
Well,
not
while you're saying it, I was going to say with the train-the-trainer, the feedback we got, which was great, was that some teachers felt like they were getting a true, pure redelivery, while other people felt that there may not be a true grasp from the person that's redelivering it. So then they're getting, I don't want to say a watered down version. That's all I have this time of evening, but they're not getting it in a true intense form where they're really able to redeliver it. And so hearing that, you brought that to me this week, last week, I was like, but it's a good point. And we appreciate teachers acknowledging that if the person giving it back to you doesn't really understand it themselves, then how are you going to get a full understanding? And so we've heard that and we said, okay, you're right. And so we do hear that feedback and try to be responsive and supportive of that.
I know what I was going to say. And so the other thing, Dr. Anderson, is that when we do hear about something from a teacher, I don't like this resource, this is not good for my kids, we always go investigate. I think that sometimes when things are going well in our district and teachers love things, we don't hear anything from them. And when things are not the way we want them to go, we hear from teachers. And sometimes it's a lot of teachers, or sometimes it's teachers all from one school. And so I won't reveal the school, but there is a school that is having an issue with the supplemental resource. So I went with my team, and I'm concerned about the way they're implementing it. It is not being implemented in the way that it is intended to be implemented. So I think we have to address that and try to fix that before we say, this resource is not helpful, this resource is not aligned, this resource is not telling me what my kid should know or should be able to do. I think there's validity in that, but I think that we have to do our due diligence to make sure that the conditions are right as we implement those resources before we make a big shift and removing a resource or adding a resource. Thank you.
Excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon. Hello. Evening. I was waiting so long, I forgot what it was. Hi, everyone. I'm here. I have my team with me here tonight. I am going to, and can y'all hear me? Report on strategic priority 3, culture and climate. And we're going to specifically focus on number 3, providing a welcoming environment and positive school and district culture for students, families, and employees. The objective that we'll focus on tonight is provide an environment in which students and staff feel safe, supported, and accepted. Objective 1, we're going to focus on number 3, the provide services to address social, emotional, mental, and behavioral well-being of all students. Initiative 3, the what? These services include the following: wraparound services, restorative discipline practices, access to the SEL curriculum, and support from our social workers. Why are we doing this? To provide appropriate services to meet the identified needs of students, allows students to focus on learning. Our goal in student support services is to literally tear down those barriers, those social emotional barriers, food insecurity, housing insecurity, any barrier that a child may be experiencing or a family may be experiencing, so that they can learn, they can read, and they can thrive academically. As you remember, last year I presented on the 3 Ps, policies, personnel, and programs. That's our overarching framework, which is what we'll be talking a little bit about tonight. One is the development of a new director of restorative discipline, Utavia Tolbert. You'll hear from her tonight, and some things that are going on in that department, and as well as expanding what our social workers are doing, and just to give you guys some data as it relates to that. So where are we now? Restorative practices or restorative discipline in our school district is underway. Ms. Tolbert is going to speak with you about that tonight. Social workers are at all schools in our district, and we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like, what that work looks like daily for them. And then also trauma-informed specialists. As for right now, you all approved 2 positions last year. We have one that's working really hard in schools, and we're going to get another one. It's coming soon. Interviews are happening in December. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ms. Gillis.
Good evening. Again, my name is Crystal Gillis. I am excited to have the opportunity to provide an overview of social work support. As a department, we strive daily to support students, families, as well as the schools to ensure that all students feel safe, that they are connected, and that they are able to engage in the learning environment. That's our primary purpose, to provide those supports and removing those barriers. So within our department currently, we have a mighty team of 12, and that includes myself. And we're all, of course, master level social workers. And I just wanted to review the scope of support that we are providing across all 21 of our sites. The first 2 bullets I wanted to highlight because those are 2 new areas of focus within our department. So, for example, our student review teams. The student review teams are comprised of the school social workers along with other support personnel within the buildings at each school. And we are responsible for ensuring that we are convening those meetings at least bi-monthly. And the purpose of the meetings that are led by the social workers, we want to make sure that when there are concerns for any student, that the entire support team within that building, which also includes the administrator, at least one of the administrators, that we have an opportunity to sit and discuss the concerns and identify the appropriate interventions and resources that are needed to support that student to resolve whatever the issue may be. Secondly, we have our case management consultation meetings. We saw that there was a gap in ensuring that schools, the entire school team, is abreast and kept abreast when we have students who are returning to school following a hospitalization for mental health support, or students who are returning to the traditional school setting from a brief incarceration or time spent at the Regional Youth Detention Center. We want to make sure that, one, we know who those students are, and that we can invite the family in, invite the team to a meeting to discuss what supports are needed to ensure a smooth transition back into the learning environment. And again, some other areas of support: crisis response, individual and small group support for students and staff. We are very much involved in submitting referrals to some of our external community partners to address economic needs, housing, medical, and mental health referrals. Of course, we are consistently and continuously in collaboration with our school counselor colleagues, school psychologists, school nurses to address any concerns of child abuse and neglect, making sure that we are indeed submitting those reports in a timely fashion. And lastly, but not any less important, we are also very much involved in providing the supports for our students who are identified under the federal McKinney-Vento homeless education, as well as our students who unfortunately are removed from their family of origin and placed into the foster care system. So I forgot I had this, sorry. Okay. All right. So often we receive the question, well, what's the difference between the social workers and the school counselors? Well, believe it or not, there's a lot of overlap in how we support students, families, and the school as a whole. Here in this graph, you'll see that both the social workers and the school counselors serve students and families. But where you'll notice school social workers, typically we are assigned to multiple sites. So we are assigned to 2 to 3 schools, where school counselors are building based. We both have the ability to connect families to community resources, but something that may be unique is that school social workers generally will take the lead on identifying housing support and that targeted financial and economic aid that families and students are in need of. Whereas the school counselors are taking the lead because they are building based to provide that SEL, that tier 1 SEL support. Okay. What usually follows the difference, what's the difference between the social worker and the counselor is, well, how do you engage the social worker? How do we refer to them if they are serving and supporting multiple buildings? Well, we have, within the last 2 years, we now have an electronic referral system, and it's referred to as SWARM, and it stands for Social Work Activity and Referral Module. So this is embedded within our student information system, Infinite Campus. So the WHO, building leaders along with the others listed here, they have the ability to enter a referral to the social worker whenever they have identified a student of concern. And the concerns span academic concerns as well as non-academic concerns. And here, as I noted, concerns impacting students' academic, physiological, as well as their psychological well-being. To date, the social workers have received over 1,000 referrals. And the top 3 referral reasons: attendance, economic aid, and family support. And I would just like to note the family support involves the need to conduct a home visit where there's been a breakdown in the communication and the relationship between the family and the school. We are often called upon to help restore or to build that relationship. And oftentimes it requires us going out into the community to try and meet with the family in their homes. So again, whenever there's an opportunity to highlight the work of, again, our mighty team of 12, I would like to just note, if we had more school social workers, meaning 1 per building, we could definitely increase our tier 2 and tier 3 social emotional support. We could also implement targeted interventions to address truancy, because that is a major issue at all levels. And lastly, to provide additional MTSS support. So again, all of our work, of course, is really focused on ensuring that the climate and the culture within our buildings, as well as the district as a whole, that it is conducive to learning, thriving, and students transitioning to the next phase of their careers prepared and feeling as though they had the opportunity to really enjoy their K-12 experience. So we also work closely with our colleague, Miss Eutivia Tolbert, and she's going to come up and share more information as to how we are really focused in supporting the needs of students and families. Ms. Tolbert?
Good evening. I won't repeat my name again because I've heard it about 3 times tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into exactly what it is that I am doing or we are doing with restorative discipline. I heard you all share your commitment as it related to the strategic plan. I am committed to helping our district create an equitable and just school culture and climate that is conducive to our students being able to learn in class. There's a direct correlation between behavior and student achievement, and it is my job, it is my commitment, it is my passion to come before you to present a plan for us to be able to do that and to do it with fidelity, right? And so with that, we have a lot of different definitions. Okay, so you guys know I taught special ed, right? It's hard for me to do 2 things at one time, but I got it.
You do?
I'm gonna differentiate.
All right. She said she got it, y'all.
Well, I thought I did. There we go.
There you go.
And so, all right. So there are a lot of different definitions that are being thrown around about restorative practices, restorative approaches, restorative discipline, restorative justice. Well, they are all used interchangeably. And my job here and my role is to ensure that we are all using the same language, that we are consistent with our practices, that we are implementing the same practices in the schools across the district so that we are all on one accord. And so for the purpose of the work that we are doing, we're going to use the definition that is provided to us by IIRP, who will be our district trainer, which is basically stating that it's a group of or a set of principles and processes and actions that are going to help us better understand how to put these principles into action. And I did capitalize action because we do a lot of talking about what we want to do, but there's not enough action behind the work. And I want to ensure that the action is actually moving forward in our buildings. Why do I want to do that? We want to reduce the risk of students entering our school to prison pipeline. There's a lot of conversation around that. We heard a lot about it in a community meeting that I attended with Ms. Davis and some other board members and district leaders, where we heard a lot about what's happening in our community. Well, it's no longer a school to prison pipeline. It's a school to community to death pipeline. And we definitely need to make sure that we're doing our part in reducing those things. We also want to reduce the use of exclusionary practices in our schools for subjective offenses. That doesn't mean that we will not hold our kids accountable for the actions that they are doing in schools, but it does mean that we really want to look at how are we treating our students of color different from our other students. Are they acting out disproportionately? Yes, they are. But why is that happening? We want to make sure that we are addressing the root cause and make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do. Additionally, we want to provide students and teachers with alternative solutions to handle and to respond to conflict and trauma in a healthy manner. Again, our community have undergone a lot of trauma within the last couple of months. Some of us have lost students, some of us have lost kids, community members due to a number of things. We want to make sure that we have provided them with the resources that they need to be healthy and successful in school. All right, so again, my role in this is to kind of get some buy-in for it, right? There's a lot of conversation around IRRP and GCC and who's serving who. The goal is to make sure that everyone is trained. GCC is working with 3 of our schools, that is Clark Middle, Clark Central, and Whit Davis. And in those schools where they are working, we are monitoring the data, and that data will be for their subjective offenses. So for CMS, which is Clark Middle, they have used restorative approaches for 139 of their incidents in the school. So they've used that as a solution. For Clark Central, they have used it for 99. They've used, I keep getting this confused, 99 incidents have been handled using restorative approaches. And at Whit Davis, it's 139. So they have seen a reduction in their discipline infractions. However, we want to get it from pedagogy to practice. So we all have learned about these approaches, but we have to get it into the hands of our students so that we can begin to change their actions so that we can definitely have more of an impact on our students. We also are looking at having IRP, which is the International Institute of Restorative Practice, to come in. They will begin coming in the week of December the 6th, and they're going to train about 23 of our leaders to be able to train the rest of our school community with restorative practice. With that being said, I have reached out to Dr. Watley to ask that 2 of the members from the board actually participate in that training with us. Because again, if we're going to make a positive impact, we want to start from the top and go down so that everybody is on one accord. They'll do 2 4.5-hour online trainings that will be followed by on-site coaching, which will be 24 hours of that. There will be ongoing coaching sessions with me and the other trainers that we will then, of course, go out into the schools and ensure that restorative discipline or approaches are being implemented with fidelity. And of course, the evaluation component, as with everything, we want to make sure that we're measuring the impact of the work on our students, not only their behavior, but student achievement. Because if we've done our job with implementing restorative practices the right way, it's going to positively impact our school climate and culture, which then leads the way to teachers being able to do what they need to do in the classroom, which should increase our student achievement. There's the implementation timeline. I've shared this with you all. I don't want to take any more of your time with reading that out to you, but please know that by August 2022, we are looking to have this fully implemented into the school, into several schools. As with everything that we do, it is going to take time. It is going to take commitment to the work. So we will pilot some of the work. I have started doing some work at Stroud Elementary School with the 4th and 5th graders. The teachers, that is, it was received. The buy-in there is good. It is going to take some time to build some structures because we talk a whole lot about the restorative circles, but we don't talk about the supports that are needed in the school. And so the circles are there to repair the harm, but how do we support it along the way in the classroom so we don't get there? So we want to make sure we're doing those things. And so we will go back out and continue that training. I've also had an opportunity to work with the bus drivers. Definitely a different approach to the work, but it was well received. I was very excited about it. I am looking forward to working with Ms. Hill and her team, the behavior specialists, so that they can begin to lay the foundation for de-escalation training for our bus drivers, along with providing them with more strategies to be successful with the students on the bus. But we will follow up with them, and that training will continue. That is it for my presentation. And if you all have any questions, I am open to them. Good job. Good night.
I have just a couple of questions, I promise.
Oh, okay, Dr. Gann.
I knew it, Dr. Gann.
Dr. Gann, can I finish
Yeah, no.
I can summarize this and then we can entertain any
Okay.
questions just real quick because we had like another slide. So our goal is to provide these services to address the social, emotional, mental, and behavioral well-being of our students. Our next goal right now is to work on SEL for our staff. And so myself, as well as the division of HR, had a wonderful meeting where we crosswalked the data between teachers' absenteeism as well as behavior. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing how there were some correlations there and some things that we could do differently for certain schools while we're still doing some things for the district. The last is trauma-informed care. How do we infuse that into what Ms. Tolbert is doing for restorative practices? And also, how do we create trauma-informed schools? We do have one school that is kind of like our shining star. They're already using mindfulness practices in the school to allow staff and students to kind of deep breathe during the day. But wouldn't that be a beautiful thing to have systemically across our district? So we've got to work intentionally with those principals and administrators to make sure that they're doing those things. It takes time. This is something that's, I don't want to say it's new, but it is new for some folks. But what I will say is they've been well received. I will say that people are craving for something different and they're open. And so that's a great opportunity for us to come in and do some wonderful, innovative things. Thank you. And now we'll take your questions.
First I want to say thank you. There's been tremendous, I think, attention spent towards just generally mental health. I sort of see all of those as falling under that umbrella. And I'm very appreciative to see that because I do think that that's a shift over the past several years. And also thank you for your work with the drivers and, professionalizing that field and making them feel, a part of the district. I did have just really a question around training. And I know that that was somewhere it was alluded to, and in my notes, I've gotten it sort of jumbled. But my question is, how, where does cultural competency fit? I'm a huge supporter of restorative practices, and I think like anything, it can get lost outside of the building and institution with, and become sort of like buzzword like. But I guess I think through like with the numbers that you provided, around like so far what's been at Clark Middle, Clark Central, and then even the 139 at Witt. And at some point, if adults are not thinking through how they show up and who they are as racial beings and all of those different things, not just racial beings, but and how that impacts discipline, I guess my fear is that although we have restorative practices and it's to repair harm, kids can start to internalize that they are still the root of that harm needing to be repaired. You know what I mean? So what is supposed to be something that's supportive and good, we still might be missing this piece. And so I guess that would be my question as far as like, where does cultural competency fit? And then where do our behavior specialists fit in this? Because a long time ago, that was sort of a significant portion, and they had the strength of, one of the unique pieces or aspects of those positions is that they could really float and be like clinical. They could support mental health needs, they could support culture and climate needs, they could, provide the cultural competence as it relates to behavior, mental health, and those things. And so it's sort of like a multifold question. Like, where do you see those things? And if we're not there, where do you see us going with that?
So we are not there yet, but we're heading in that direction. One of the unique things about me is that I've served in all of those different roles, right? And so I've had an opportunity to view it as a teacher, as an administrator, special ed coordinator, and now in this role. I am going to begin doing more work with the behavior specialist with doing that. But as a part of restorative practice training, you can't restore anything that you don't know, right? And so my initial training that I have been rolling out before IRP has even come in. I know that GCC is doing some of the work, but it is to help us reflect on ourselves and our why and our own biases and how we need to approach different situations that are occurring in the school and why we are disciplining the way that we are disciplining. And that is, for me, with the work, the root of the problem. Why are we handling the children of color the way that we're handling them? Based on what? And so that work is moving forward. We will be working with the behavior specialists to do that. I do know that Khadijah Hanna and Benita Wade are definitely working to try to get that rolled out. And so as soon as we can collaborate more in that space, then we will be able to get that training rolled out. Right now, we're just trying to lay the foundation for restorative practice so that we can go ahead and get it implemented and then layer in those things on top so that we can make sure, again, that we are aware of who and what we are so that we can change what we need to do.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Another question? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
I don't even know who this question goes to, but I'm keeping up with the SEL because that's very important to the health and the well-being of all of our kids. But I'm also counting head count. And so we've got social workers, school counselors, behavior specialists, and then we have the community school people coming on board, right? And so is that it in terms of the people that are addressing this particular aspect of our educational process or barrier to education?
Honestly,
I'm sorry.
honestly, I think that's a full approach. I don't think that's just it. I think that this particular initiative is going to take everybody looking at SEL because SEL definitely impacts everyone from the board all the way down, right? I'm sure that there's some situations that have occurred as board members, as we heard early on, that we could possibly use restorative practice or SEL practices to be able to address those things. So I think that that is something that we have to address as a school community, as we found out in that community meeting, there are people that are willing to work, and they have been contacting us. DJJ has contacted us, Mr. Ford. We had a meeting today with Mr. Hardy. So the community, the
They're
conditions are right. They are ready. They are ready to move on this. And because the conditions are right, we can now positively make a change in our school community where we all are focused on this initiative.
And we have
Can I
psychologists,
also
we
say
have
we
our
have school
trauma-informed-
psychologists
I
and
just said
trauma-informed care
trauma-informed
specialists.
So I don't think we can just say that's it. I mean, we
Yeah.
have, yes, a wide range of individuals that are doing. And I know we had asked about those community schools, Mr. Harris. I think he had put some information in there. I think it's been in like 3 or 4 of our Friday updates. So if you go back and look, because I know you did ask about that, and I asked him, and he was going to send me those dates, and I know he's been slammed. But I know it's been in 3 or 4 of our Friday updates with information kind of around what those community school organizers are doing. So if you check back on that, and then if you still have questions around them, I meant to say that, get that to you, Ms. Davis. Please let us know that as well.
And Ms. Davis, I was just whispering to Dr. Watley. We also have our SEL curriculum that are implemented every day. So in our elementary school, we have Second Step, and we've had Second Step for many years. We, brain freeze, Mindset is our SEL curriculum that we have in the middle school level. And then we also have a school, Barnett Shows, that is bringing on The Leader in Me, which is a leadership SEL that came out of their LSGT. And then we're looking to add this leadership training. Some other schools have been interested in adding The Leader in Me based on their work with their SEL curriculums.
So I'll say that the reason is, again, and I will follow up with you, Dr. Thomas, too, to just kind of get this together so that we can have this conversation with the community organizations, because there are many, and they really do want to plug in at the right place to meet you on the community's responsibility in helping our kids as well. So it would be nice to have that nice compact thing that says, these are the things that we're doing inside the school system. And then as our partners outside, these are some expectations that you can meet to help us get there. That would be amazing.
Yes, and we will cover some of that in our summit on December 4th. My calendar's down, but the what used to be known as the Crisis in Black Education, which is now being called the Opportunity for Black Education. Mr. Fred Smith really wants to revision that to something more positive. And so we have Mr. Gaskins talking about where we are in terms of our students of color and their academic performance. And Dr. Watley is going to be talking about where we are in terms of social, emotional, mental health needs. And then Soraya and Stephen will be talking about what we're doing. So she can share some of what you just said. And then that team will be looking at ways that the community can work with us and engage with us to fill those gaps. So those are the 3 groups that will be presenting from the school district, 3 departments. So some of that will be addressed that day as well.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
What day are you referring to? I'm sorry.
That was, we shared it out. It's December, it is 4th, right?
Yeah.
From 10 to 1, Hillsman Cafeteria.
All right.
Yes.
I have one thing, one concern. And we talk about youth organizations, and it's a personal one for me, but I would like to make sure that Mr. Harris, Dr. Harris, if he doesn't mind, a lot of the youth organizations signed up through him and his department last year. I know I haven't been receiving as an organization information. And I want to make sure that organizations are not excluded, because that, as I understood it last week, that is a community organization. So I just want to make sure that everyone is in the loop who wants to be. And I have one other question about GCC. Are they held? We talk about evaluation. That's one of the things you all talked about. So are they expected to provide the same level of evaluation? Are they being, what they're doing, is it being aligned to what the organization that we're using is doing?
Absolutely. That was one of the things we want to make sure and you come speak deeply about it, we worked intentionally on that contract to make sure that we're not only providing a service, but that we're getting the bang for our buck. And that means that there's going to be there's a standard for GCC. There's also a standard for IIRP, and they are required to follow that standard. We're also going to hold very tightly to meeting with them to make sure that they're delivering what we've asked in our district. And if that's not working, then we need to come back to the table and pivot.
So when we make that flexibility to extend for those schools that were there, Dr. Watley and I worked very closely together to make sure that if we were going to make that exception, that there's needed to be the same level of accountability and expectations that were held for every group that had applied for that through that RFP.
And to be clear, one of the measures will be the subjective offenses. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Okay.
It's actually written within their contract.
Okay.
Mhm.
And that goal is there to make sure that we will meet monthly, Mr. Malik and I, to review that data. He also has established a timeline within the school that he is actually serving that I'll be able to go and participate in as well, so that we can see where they are and to determine again the impact of their work on this. It's our hope that we will
Absolutely.
meet our goal at the end.
Great. Could I ask for I'm trying to figure out how to articulate the question that that keeps coming up regarding recent violence in both of the high schools. And one of the open letters, or the only open letter that was sent from a collection of teachers in the high schools, related to, and I'm going to very not succinctly quote this, related to a lack of accountability for behavioral infractions in the schools, leading to this sort of chaos then bubbling up in the hallways and and then you know what happened. So I'm trying to figure out how, in my mind, and perhaps others feel the same way, to articulate that this process is fixing the issue of inequitable discipline, while also ensuring that there's calm and there's a space for education to still happen. So can you help? Can you?
Yeah, at first I want to level set here. If we look at the research right now, that behavior and attendance and what teachers are enduring is system-wide. It's not just CCSD specific. One thing that the consultant, Dr. Welch, and I talked about along with UTV and some principals was that you're seeing this wave of new pandemic behavior. So what behavior looks like before the pandemic, it looks very different. And we know as researchers in this room that that's lagging in terms of research. So what do we have to do is we have to empower and give the teachers the tools to manage this behavior, not the behavior from 3 years ago, because the behavior is different. Right now they have in schools, in our high schools, 2 sets of 9th graders. Yes, one has moved on, but their behavior is immature. So we have to intentionally focus on how we're going to train the teachers. I mean, even our teachers that are coming from UGA, the research is lagging on how to deal with pandemic behavior. There's been no research on that. They're researching that now, right? So as that moves forward, that means that we have to shift in our practices, shift also in our thinking, because the world has changed. So the hope, and I believe that this work is going to also impact those things, but then also we've got to shift in other areas, because you can't have one part of the ship moving and the other part staying still. It's an in tandem process. If you want to see the data move forward, we have to first recognize that our children have changed. Our teachers have changed. Everybody in this room has changed. And if we continue to do what we've always done, we'll get what we've always gotten. So we have to make some changes there. And so I'll let Utivia speak to that more specifically.
As far as it relates to restorative practices, I want to reiterate that it is going to help reduce the number of incidents that we have, not eliminate. And so if we can reduce it so that we can bring about the calm and provide or set the conditions for teachers to be able to teach, then we should be able to be more successful. In doing that, to restore is not to remove consequences, right? And so they're still going to get consequences, but if they're going to be suspended because they fought or created a riot in a school, then yes, we're going to be able to, we have to give consequences, but we want to make sure that we have used restorative approaches as they are re-entering the school. So what does your re-entry plan look like? What is it going to look like when you come in as far as your academics? What does it look like when you're on the bus? So we want to make sure that there's a contract in place before you even get back, and we've provided the student with the resources that they need to be successful. In addition to that, not only did you harm whoever it was you was fighting, you harmed the district. Like you impacted our reputation. You've impacted the reputation of your school. So let's talk about how you're going to fix that. Let's talk about how we can sit down and make your school a better place by increasing the pride in your school. So our department, along with Mr. Gaskins and other divisions, we responded. And I do think we responded pretty quickly to that incident. And I was very clear that if we did not respond appropriately, then those things that you just talked about would happen. So we wanted to make sure, Mr. Preston left. Oh, he's in the back. We wanted to make sure that even as we handled the hearings that came behind that, that we use restorative approaches during the hearing to make sure that the kids understood, look, this is what happened. We get it. We understand that you guys had a little bit more time on your hand when you were at home during the pandemic, but we're back in school, and here are the expectations. And with that being said, here are your consequences. We love you. We're going to see you when you come back, and we're going to ensure that you be successful the rest of your time in Clark County. So restorative approaches will help calm the place by providing those conditions or those principles that we need to make sure that the environment remains stable. Along with that, of course, PBIS, other SEL, all of those things are under the same umbrella. So restorative practice is not something in addition to, it's something that we're already doing, and we want to make sure that we strengthen that at the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 level of the MTSS process. So hopefully that answered it for you.
That's awesome.
Yes, ma'am.
Where are the parents in this?
I knew
You know,
that was
because
coming.
you say everybody, we all changing. Like you said, we all are changing through this pandemic. So we often leave the parents out of this. So, where are they in this plan? I know we got like parent university. I think that's an awesome idea. But when they are coming back into the school, how do we help the parents to help the children?
So as we are implementing restorative approaches, we do want to make sure that we train our school community on what that is. You can't implement something and everyone not have the same understanding of it. So as a part of the rollout plan, we want to make sure that we train our parents, be it if it's through a virtual meeting or if they are actually coming in. I did speak with Dr. Harris about being able to work with his team as we are having listening sessions to see where we can actually begin that work with our parents. I would actually like to have them as a part of our train-the-trainer team, especially the neighborhood leaders, because they are peers and they could have a little bit more impact in the community than we do. So being able to train them so that they're able also to go out and train other parents or other community members so that we can, again, make sure that it's implemented with fidelity across the school community.
Well, I appreciate, the fact that it's starting to really look like community.
Yes.
I think we might have a community school, something going on. Sounds good.
Trying. And I think one of the beautiful things, I'll just say this, and I told Dr. Thomas this, was when myself and Lawrence Harris and my team, and we attended that community meeting. It was beautiful. I mean, just for folks to be able to transportation, we all just sat and came up with great solutions and learned really, it was more transparent how you can lean on one to get results in the other. And it was such a beautiful experience for myself, if I can say that. And if we continue with that momentum, we continue with that energy, we can move mountains here in CCSD. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
The social worker presentation, but it kind of, I think, encompasses all of it. Before she got to the point of talking about if we had more social workers, I wrote down, we have 12 social workers. Do we need more? I mean, that seemed like a rhetorical question, right? I mean, it seemed like 12, and then I wrote down how many students are served by each social worker, and then you came out, you like answered all of my questions, and then you were like, we have over 1,000 referrals, and so that's a lot of students per social worker, and so I just wanted to give some appreciation first of all, and then also in all of this talk about all the people who can be brought together to help a student, I was wondering who coordinates that. Is that a social worker? So there has to be a sort of a point person, right? To say like, this student now needs this. We need to bring everybody in, or who we need to bring in.
So yes, the student review team that I referenced, that is facilitated by the school social worker for that building. So they're responsible for ensuring that the team, the school-based team, that they are holding the meetings to really staff the students of concern. The same applies for the case management consultation meetings. The school social workers are the point persons to ensure that when we become aware that a student is returning to the building, and I would like to note that generally comes through our student registration office a lot of times when a student has been out for a significant period of time and they are returning, I will receive the notification from Ms. Carla Fonseca, and I immediately notify the social worker for that building to say, hey, this is the student, these are the circumstances, we need to schedule a meeting. And they immediately act to contact the family and to notify the team.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't have a question. Well, it might be a question. It's more of a comment. I appreciate that y'all got some magic. I appreciate that y'all are accepting, acknowledging that the way that we've always done things is not the way that we need to keep on doing it, and making the adjustments to support everybody. And then I was gonna say, I hope that the rest of the district kind of follows y'all's lead. And what you just said is that y'all are kind of leaning on each other. I hope that at some point we can get to the point where that is visible for the entire community. Just saying that the people in the district are working together for the betterment of our students, in a wraparound kind of way. So I don't know. I just really want to point out y'all got some magic, and I just want to sit over there and like be real close and rub shoulders with y'all, because I want to be like y'all when I grow up. And real quick, I do want to shout out Miss Talbot, because Miss Talbot was my first interaction with a public school building, and I was concerned about my Black boys being in a predominantly white school, and Miss Talbot was like, "Not here. You ain't got to worry about it." So I appreciate you, Miss Talbot.
Absolutely. Well, we're here. And our goal right now, like I said the other day, we had this wonderful meeting with HR about what we could do to support our staff, and we've noticed that there's been a tremendous amount of grief. And so we're looking at holding not necessarily grief groups, but just teaching people how to cope through the holidays, giving them more tools in their toolboxes, because what worked 3 years ago may not work now. And we got to acknowledge that. And so those are some things we're looking into doing and rolling out some other activities. But I thank you all.
And can I just say
Yes.
real quick, individually,
Yes, ma'am.
definitely support any, movements in the future for more resources around mental health, because you all have, everybody's, really stressed, but with mental health, it's sort of, you capture all of that stress of everybody. And when you think of the number of schools, the number of students that we have, and like counselors per student ratio, it's just, it's huge. It's a lot of work, a lot of heavy lifting. So
Last year, one thing I did, and I'm going to look to bring that back this year, is I had a series for all support personnel. It was called Are You Okay? And I brought somebody in to work not only with the behavior specialist, but also the psychologist, and they could just listen in and get strategies to kind of help them, because sometimes as helpers, no one really asks us if we're okay. I've been accustomed to that because I'm a school psychologist. That was my first baby. And we always show up. And so I I got so much feedback from that. They said for the first time they felt like somebody asked them if they were okay. It was very tender, but we did. I'm looking at bringing that back too again. So thank you all so much.
That's it, an hour and so a lot of time over, sorry. But I hope it was good information and that you got.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. Thank you.
I know, right? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas and Cabinet and Chiefs. I think that was really encouraging and eye-opening. We have work to do, and really thinking that we're heading. We're beginning to head in the right direction.
So we'll continue to do one per month, hopefully a short one, and then we'll do another one like this in March.
This was good.
Wonderful.
This was really good.
Thank you all so much. Well, we will move forward to item 5, and that is adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Wait, okay.
How
So
y'all
I
gonna
think
still
that
have
was
like
Ms.
that?
Gallagher
I thought it was
for
good
motion
conversation.
and Ms. Hull for a second. Seeing there are no objections, we are adjourned at 8:42. Have a good evening.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it. Okay, where's